Okay, Captain Ryan, this is the top of the hour. It's 1 o'clock California time, and let's go ahead and get started. This is a subject that is near and dear to our hearts, and we want to thank everybody for taking the time and jumping on. Really excited to dive into this. I'm David Dulany with Tenbound, and I have let's say my mentor, my sergeant at arms, my coach, all wrapped up in one. Mr. Ryan Riesert with Connect and Sell. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, David. Really excited for this conversation and hopefully active engagement with the folks who are joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already got questions coming in. As a warning, the brains of the operation is on maternity leave right now, so I'm attempting to run the controls here. So hopefully everybody jump in with questions. Be as patient as you can, and we're going to get through all the Q&A that comes in. Right now, really, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So don't feel like you're interrupting. We've got a few points that we want to go through and some things that, we could potentially discuss, but we want to take this in a direction that's useful for everybody on the call. So go ahead and use that Q&A button, and Ryan and I will throw that out, and we want to get your feedback as well. So let's jump in. So I don't know about you, everybody, but I looked at the pipeline about a month ago and it was gone. It was crazy. I mean, I won't bore you with all the details, but just to make a long story short, it went from a very robust killer pipeline. We were looking at an awesome 2020, and everything was go. And then of course this crisis happened and we had to reset everything. And few things that we learned on the way, and working with Ryan and his team has been amazing, just trying to figure out, hey, pipeline's gone, now what do we do? So let's go into this and jump in. Really quick before we get started, I wanted to let everybody know, obviously the Tenbound conference, we were doing New York City and San Francisco this year. That's pushed out. We're going to do those next year as soon as we can all get back together. But we're doing virtual as well in about a month on June 18th. It's going to be leadership focused. And then in August, it's going to be focused on the three different parts: rep training, leadership, and revenue operations. So just head over to tenbound.com conference and sign up, and we're looking forward to an awesome event. So just wanted to throw that out there real quick. So Ryan, let's get started, dude. There's already questions coming in, but there's a few points that you had as we were preparing for this that I definitely wanted to focus on. And one of those was how no matter what's happening with COVID-19 and the fact that the world is in disarray right now, we still have to build pipeline every day, and how critical that is to our success, obviously, in sales development, and how it really comes back to those fundamentals. I mean, I think people are just, because it's so scary out there, and things are changing so fast, that they're looking for that silver bullet, that mythical silver bullet. And we just came to the conclusion, like, hey, unfortunately, the bad news is we got to go back to like the blocking and tackling of sales development here, and really hone in on the basic processes that you even talked about in your book. So a few of those, we've got up here, but let's just talk about it. So in focusing on the fundamentals and going back to that block and tackling, as you went through in your book, Outbound Sales No Fluff, let's talk about a little bit, what does that actually mean, and dive in to what do we do now?
Yeah, and so I think it's really interesting that the crisis here is helping organizations think about, especially the top of funnel, more than they ever had before, right? They're scared shitless to go out and interrupt someone's day if they can't actually provide something of value. And so that's actually an opportunity for us all to rethink what we should have been doing all along, right? And so, I hammer this point home all the time: target, message, channel, timing, target, message, channel, timing. And so that rule number one and especially in the top of funnel, if we're going to interrupt someone's day, is we want to make sure that we're solving a problem or we go away, right? Solve a problem or go away. But what does that mean? And I think that some people get caught up in what a problem really is. And so diving, like double clicking into that a little bit further, to use a cliche term here, no one gives a shit about you, your product, or service. They don't. They care about their role and the jobs they need to do, the jobs to be done. There's a great framework on this, the jobs to be done concept. You can Google it. There's Harvard Business Review articles. You can get all the information you want. I think Josh Braun talks about this quite a bit as well, and he's a phenomenal person if you haven't followed his content around this concept of, look, I have certain things that I need, want. These are things that, whether I'm a consumer of a B2C product or I'm a buyer of a B2B product, if you fundamentally break down what I want to accomplish, there are jobs to be done to get things done, right? So when we talk about a problem, you need to understand, when you're reaching out to someone, what is that person's role and how can you align your product or service around what they need to accomplish? Okay, that's what we talk about with solve a problem or go away. And so when you're targeting, if you truly understand the jobs to be done concept, you understand your customer, you understand why they work with you, why they chose you in the first place, why they're going to continue to work with you over time. You really understand that concept. You can be really confident in your engagement model, right? When I get you on the phone, when I send an email, when I'm engaging on social, I'm chatting here. If I understand who you are, your role, I can then quickly decipher the jobs to be done. And I can tell you right away if I can solve a problem or get the hell out, right? And so in the middle of this crisis, targeting becomes really important. But let's look into that a little bit further. Step 2, get the fluff out of the way, like you said, David. There's so much damn fluff in our targeting that we have an ill-defined understanding of our TAM, our total addressable market, and that is just causing a lot of issues, right? Folks are out there using automation, just grabbing anyone, everyone that looks like someone they should be talking to, throwing them in and figuring out, hey, hopefully something sticks. They're sticking against the wall. But do you truly know, if you know the jobs to be done, you know the reason why someone might want to work with you, you now can go out and find and develop a list of accounts and the people within those accounts that you can actually have. That's your total addressable market. But there's a concept that you can take this further of, there's actually the total addressable market, and then there's subsets of that. The SAM, right, your serviceable addressable market, or the SOM, or however you want to say that, your actual serviceable obtainable market. And so those subsets of your TAM are, when you're thinking about everyone you potentially could serve, that's your TAM, versus who you can actually serve, like at some point, really based on your size, your penetration in the market, your price point, those types of things, versus your obtainable, who can you serve now, more short term. And so when we think about our go-to-market strategy in this crisis, we really should be hyper focused on that SOM, right? The ones that we can get those short-term wins, because as a sales professional, our job is to drive revenue now, right? Those short-term wins are going to be key. However, we've got to keep in mind that that's still a subset of our actual serviceable market and our total addressable market. We don't want to get too far out of what we call our swim lane, right? That's in the book, Stick to Your Swim Lane. But being smart about who you can serve and spending time with those who are actually going to pay, and you can, keep each other, in business right now, is going to be really important. And then the final step here, of course, is what we're going to talk about today is buckets. And I bring this up all the time, but we can dive a little bit more into what that actually means and how to take advantage of it following this process of understanding the jobs to be done, understanding our actual serviceable market, and then finally having a methodical way about going about our day to be as efficient as possible to earn those conversations and start moving the needle here.
Okay, Ryan, this is great. So questions are starting to come in. So on the first point that you made, nobody cares about you. Their heads down, they're focused on the jobs to be done. And we have a couple of those articles that you mentioned. We'll put the link in the comments. One of the questions is, so how would you recommend going about finding out what the jobs to be done and who is the people getting those jobs done?
Yeah, I mean, so this should be a part of your onboarding, by the way. If companies don't have this as a part of their onboarding, it starts by understanding your customers. So
Yeah.
if you're at a startup that doesn't have any customers, well, you're probably not going to have a lot of success in this environment anyway. So let's just assume you have some customers, right? Some customers you work with today. Um, if you haven't had a chance to interview them or get the information of how they would answer these questions, then there's a series of simple questions that you can go through to better understand who your customers or why your customers chose you in the first place, right? Um, you know, where were they at mentally? What was the real problem or pain they had? The job that they were trying to do? How did they try to do it without you? What did they, was it by themselves? Was it with others? Why did they choose to then work with you? What was that catalyst that finally initiated that interest and engagement? And then finally, why do they continue to work with you? So there's a whole series of questions you can go through to interview your current customers. Shoot, you can also interview your, even better, interview the customers that left you, especially in this environment. Why did they decide not to work with you right now? What was it that made them no longer need your product or service? That's also really, really good information to help you understand who your best customer, your next best customer is, right? And so understanding the pain and the actual experience that the customer was having when they decided to work with you helps you understand that jobs to be done concept. The job to be done is literally, what are you eliminating from their role to drive the outcome that needs to be done, right? So let me give you an example of that right now, right? If you're selling to salespeople, my job to be done as a salesperson is to bring revenue into the company, right? It's not to be doing lead research. It's not to be doing cold calls. It's not to be drafting email copy. It's not, there's all these other things that I do, but my job to be done is to get revenue in the door, right? So what are the things that I need to do to get revenue in the door? The jobs to be done to get to the job to be done, the activities, the things that someone can service me are things like automating my lead research, helping me with my messaging, getting me into more conversation, setting appointments for me. Who knows, right? There's all sorts of things that I have to do, but my ultimate job to be done is to drive revenue. And so once you understand the ultimate outcome that I need to, like, that's what gets me paid, that's what gets me hired, that may get me fired, that might create a lot of risk. Those drivers, once I understand that, then I can start to look at those things in my day that are not very valuable as my actual job, right? If I could just be getting people to sign papers all day and put money in the door, everything else I do doesn't matter anymore, right? So if you could do every single thing in my job for me, and all I was doing is accomplishing the outcome and taking credit for that, now I'm going to be with you forever, right? I'll pay you a lot of money if I'm making more than what I have to pay you to get there, right? So that's really important to understand. Most people would look at the role and say, no, your job to be done is to actually send the email, right? Let me automate your email. That's very different than when we're talking about messaging versus your job is to get revenue. Why are you even wasting your time with emails, right? So there's an interesting dynamic there when you actually get in there and understand how a customer looks at you as a product or service to get that job done for them, and how does that relate to the ultimate outcomes of what my real responsibility is within the organization.
Got it. So I think, there's two ways to look at that. There's your own process as an SDR or a sales rep and what your job to be done is, and trying to really work that process down to the point where you're really laser focused on just those activities and, deferring or outsourcing or getting rid of the rest. But then on the flip side, there's the people that you're actually calling, and you're almost coming at them as, hey, let me take some of this off your plate so that I can help you get your job done, with whatever product or service that you have. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're taking into consideration of, you should think about your own self, right? You're your own customer as a salesperson. So, finding those things that, if you truly understand the value of your time, you can certainly look at that. That's for that's for your own stuff. But when we're talking about go to market, like you may not be selling to salespeople, you might be selling, whatever widget to some other department. You've got to understand what their job is, right? If you're the head of security, it's to make sure that, there is no breach, right? Or, there's no data issue, right? In order for them to do that job, they have to have all these other things in place, but ultimately their job is to prevent any disaster. That's an example. Or, if you're the, CFO, right? It's to make sure that, more money's coming in than going out, right? Or don't run out of money. Again, I don't sell to CFOs, but that's ideally the idea, right? So what are all the different jobs that they have to do? They have to, do a lot of things. But in their job, the main thing is to ensure that there's, cash flow, right? Cash flow. And so thinking about that and really understanding who your customer is and what the heck that you provide within their day is going to really help you hone in on, first and foremost, who are the best customers for you to be selling into. And then behind that, what the heck you should be saying to them, right? Because again, no one cares about your widget. They don't care that you can automate my emails. They care that by doing that, it allows me to drive more revenue.
Got it. Okay, so going deep on that, and then the other couple questions that came in on the TAM, TOM, and SOM. So we got to go through those again. But in that regard, one from Chris, and hey, Chris, thanks for jumping on. In the period of transition, which markets are more resilient and less susceptible to volatility than others? And how do we pivot to those more resilient markets? So now we're talking about, the addressable market and how you drilled down there a little bit. But how do we find those ones that are like, not every company can be Zoom, right? That's an easy one. They're crushing it right now. But how do we like pivot toward those?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different definitions of resilient. It's a great question. I think if you take the time to look at some signals within the organizations, you ultimately want to look at things like, man, are they still actively hiring people, right? Like that's probably a company that's being a little bit resilient. They're not in the business of laying off, furloughing, and things like that. They're probably more resilient if they're hiring and growing. Are they still investing in growth, right? Do you see them still actively advertising and sponsoring things and being active in a top of funnel perspective? That's probably a really good indicator that they're resilient because they're still investing in growth. They're not worried about shutting their doors tomorrow. That's always a huge indicator of any organization. If you see them stop sales, stop marketing, that's not a very good indicator of they're going to be around for quite some time, right? We all know Python's life. There's actually a really interesting list that I saw being curated or sent out there from, I think, a SIF data or something like that. 17,000 companies that are resilient, in this crisis. And the indicators they mentioned were still hiring, still advertising, and I think there was something else in there that I thought was pretty interesting. I can't remember, but those are things to look out for. And depending on what you sell, what product or service you're offering, I don't think it's necessarily just an industry thing, right? Because there's plenty of folks that would have thought HR, like staffing and recruiting, is just decimated, but the reality is some of those are thriving, right? Think about staffing firms who are focused on nursing and things like that. Like, holy shit, every hospital across the world is short on nursing staff right now, right? So that's if you're a recruiter in that space, then you're probably thriving because it's a bull market, if you will, right? You got to find as many people as you can, and so it's not necessarily an industry thing. It's more of an organization, research that you've got to get into, where you've got to better understand their position, who are they trying to service, and are they actually pivoting? Another example of this, I did a call to a hotel chain that was a part of a webinar I did, and I was just reaching out to folks who I was trying to learn about, like, where are they at. And I wanted to see, hey, you were interested in cold calling before all this happened. What are you guys up to now? Learn something fascinating, right? This hotel chain made a quick pivot, right? They started to offer rooms for um, uh, you know, essential workers to be able to quarantine themselves against their family, right? They're going to go work at a hospital or any other place. If they were exposed, they didn't want to go home to their family or loved ones, so they turned their hotel from servicing people who, you know, go there for skiing and whatnot into a place for essential workers. They have like the best fill rates as possible. It got picked up by national news. People local in the community are donating to pay for the room stays, and you know, that's a hotel chain. You would think they're probably struggling, and you know, they were resilient and made a pivot. So don't think about the industry, think about the organization, and you know, that's always been the case of targeting companies and then, you know, again, selling to people within those organizations.
Who would have known? Okay, another question that came in. You had mentioned the list is the strategy. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that kind of goes into, I think, you know, we don't spend enough time on the list. You know, we kind of feel like the list will just kind of take care of itself, and we got to go through it and find the people manually. But you're taking a much more radical approach. It seems that the list is the actual strategy, and so it's like now we've got a pretty good idea about what's resilient and where we should spend our time, who the people are, and what the job to be done. Where do we start as far as the list?
Yeah, David, this isn't radical. It's what you should always be doing, right?
Fundamentals.
I still can't wrap my mind around organizations who rely on, you know, someone who just joined their company for the first time to go and find their next best customers. It just blows my mind, right? The list is your strategy. The list is your strategy. What does that mean? I mean,
Yeah.
you should be spending your time trying to sell to your next best customer, right? That's always the case. And so it does take time to go and find the right companies and the right contacts within those companies. And if you want to shortcut it and go and buy data, and you buy in masses, you're only creating more headache for yourself. It's better to map those organizations, get a really strong list of those companies built out, then go find within those companies the one person who really owns the job to be done as your first person to start that engagement with. Get perfect data on those individuals as best you can. You know, make sure your email is deliverable, make sure the phone works, make sure they're active on social. If you're going to use a triple touch outreach, identify that. This is buckets, right? Identify those paths, and then spend your time engaging those folks, and you're working them until you get one of those 4 outcomes. Yes, no, not me, not now. This isn't rocket science, right? It's really target, message, channel, timing. But target is the most important thing in your go to market. If you're going to be proactively selling, you're proactively doing outreach to organizations, you ought to spend the time to ensure that those organizations that you think you can help.
Okay.
And you don't, you know, like, I don't know why that's challenging for folks, but it's so important. And people want to shortcut it. They want to get leads for as cheap as possible. What they don't realize is the most expensive part in this entire equation is the labor you put towards those leads, and it's really, really expensive to have your, you know, $100,000 SDR chasing, you know, some revenue leader in an industry that you have no business trying to serve. Right? That's just a fact.
So how should that conversation go? Like, say you're sitting here, you're an SDR, and you're like, okay, I buy into this. The list is the strategy. I got to get the right companies, the right people, know my message. I'm down for this. But you know, there's a cost to that. There's a cost of putting in time to build the list, or potentially paying somebody on Upwork or Fiverr to make a list for you. How do you explain that cost to the manager or the owner of the company? And they might turn around and go, well, isn't that your job to make the list? Like, you're an SDR, you know. How do you think that they should handle that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is stuff that you should uncover in, you know, when you're joining a company in the first place, right? You know, if I'm joining a company one of the things I'm going to ask is, walk me through my day, and how am I deciding, who to target, and how do I go about my day, right? Is that provided to me, or do you expect me to do that work? So that's going to help you understand how to approach that. And, I'd steer clear from organizations that expect you to do all the, to make all the decisions around the future of the business, because that's just insane to me. I would imagine that there should be some sort of strategy around the types of organizations and the people within those organizations that you want to earn conversations with, and then let you go out there, and your job is to go have those conversations. If you work for a company that doesn't quite get that, it's pretty simple for you to understand the value of your time. There's I think his name's Dan Kennedy, has this formula. You can work out the value of your time. Essentially, take your base salary, right?
Yeah.
Take your base salary, and multiply that by, or divide that by 1760, which is basically 8 hours a day, 220 days, and now you got your a number, and then multiply that by about 3, and that gives you, because that's like the amount of productive hours you actually have, where you're really doing work. All the other stuff's distraction in an 8-hour day, and this is just a baseline, and that gives you a number, right? So for a $100,000 rep, your number is probably in the like $200 or $300 range. And so, researching leads and things like that, you can get a lot done for $300 an hour. You could actually probably hire a whole nother person to get that done for you, if they're providing you a list. And so it's not expensive to go, find a, $10, $15 an hour laborer to build lists for you, ensuring that they have a high business acumen and accuracy with your defined process. It's probably worth spending a few $100 a month to have a list curated for you, so that you're spending more time actually activating and having conversations with that list than doing that work yourself. Now, be careful there, right? Because if you hire someone to build your list for you and they don't get it, your instructions aren't super clear, or it's a little bit more difficult for someone to understand exactly what you're looking for. It's not just as simple as the head of sales at a tech company that has 500 people. Even that can be complex for some of these folks. You're going to waste a lot of time QAing the list. And so, there's a balance there, but at some point you've got to put in the work to get that list built. That list is your strategy. Once it's built, you want to activate it and follow your buckets relentlessly, right? That's your job.
So essentially you could come out of pocket on this yourself. Like if you can't get support from the company to help you to refine the list, and the list is your strategy, so it's critical, you could actually go on to Upwork and employ somebody for like $10 an hour to make it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, as far as QAing it, you're going to be wasting time anyway if you're like manually sifting through your database to find people and find phone numbers and emails. It's just that it's like elongated out throughout your day that you're doing that. So instead, what you're saying is kind of up front at the beginning, do all that really hard work, get a good list that's big enough, and then put it into the bucket system that you described.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's dive in. Oh, you know what? I had one other question. I want to talk about buckets because this is huge. I got a question from Tyler. So can you cover at some point, how has your use of technology and automation and outreach channel changed before and after March of 2020? What's been your biggest change?
So, this year I joined Connect and Sell. So,
Connect and
we
Sell?
we run a conversation first process, and so
Okay.
there is no emails, there's no automation going until we get into a conversation, and at that point, we may drop it into some sort of follow up and things like that. But it's a conversation first. But prior to Connect and Sell, ran more of a multi-touch system with the sales developers, which included, some automated emails alongside phones. And what I know most organizations have done is they've cut back or significantly changed their email strategy off of automation and much more, if not semi-automated, to full personalization, at least in the beginning touches, which based on what I've seen in the work that we were doing at the sales developers, that's an important strategy to deploy anyway, because most of the automated emails aren't really working, right? So it's just noise, it's just spam, and so that's a change I've seen. I think another thing that I'm seeing more and more organizations do with technology is leverage video as a part of their process. Obviously you're seeing that a lot with just Zoom in itself, but from a prospecting perspective, adding in those videos when they're sending emails to ensure that it's more personalized. So you can use some of that automation from a template perspective, but then you're personalizing with an actual personalized video. It's something I've done for quite some time, and I continue to do more of that these days, just to cut through the noise and make sure people realize that I'm spending time on my side to show you that I have a specific reason for reaching out, and that goes right back to the fundamentals in the beginning, right? I'm not reaching out unless I believe I can solve a problem. My main mission is to solve a problem or go away, and so you can go ahead and tell me to go away, and seem to get a very high response rate, even if it is a no. That's fine too. It just it saves a lot of time, energy, and effort with video being added into the stack. I'm curious what you're seeing, David,
Yeah.
on that side.
Yeah, definitely. From our perspective, it's about understanding the people that are out there that are trying to solve problems in a sales development perspective, and then being able to get them together and just do Q&As like this, and be able to give people new ideas and strategies without necessarily any sort of commitment on their part, just so we can build the community and be able to bring that together. Because at that point, when the time is right and they're ready to go, obviously all of our training and consulting and everything is virtual anyways, and the events are going to be online and they're going to come back. So we know that eventually they'll come back to us and we can do some business. But right now it's like, hey, everyone's out there just like their heads spinning. So how do we get some new tips and techniques out there and add value without being totally commercially minded? And it's been going great. I mean, it's definitely something that we want to continue even after the crisis. So there hasn't been a big change. I mean, like we do a little bit of automated email and really focus on having conversations with people. But otherwise, it's just how can we help and how can we support the community at this time, and hope eventually it comes back around. So, other question I had for you, Ryan, that came in. I want to go into buckets here. I know I keep saying that, but the questions are coming in. We had one. It says, I just joined a new company 7 weeks ago as a BDM, and I have to contact our partners now to activate my product with. How do I attract our partners more, be more active and positive, at least while doing the call? So it sounds like Mustafa is more business development. He's building up partnerships and he's trying to activate the partnerships, which is always a tough job. Is he following this same kind of process of, companies that are doing well, people that are, in charge of getting the job done, giving them value, and then having conversations?
Yeah, I mean, same process, right? When you're talking about, being positive, getting into I mean, you should always be doing these things. If you don't believe you can support a partner, then don't pick up the phone and call them. If you do, pick up the phone and call them and explain why you believe that to be the case. They have a job to be done. How does your product or service align to the job that they need to get done? And and go have that conversation. Same process, same exact process.
Got it. And so how do you set this up then? So, I mean, what I love about this system, this is from your book, which I highly recommend if people haven't picked it up, Outbound Sales, No Fluff. And so how do you set this up? Do you set this up on like the contact record in Salesforce, and you just basically have 5 different buckets and you've got a report? These are the people I haven't talked to. These are the people that are in my process, etc. How do you set this up?
Yeah, you're falling into the trap that almost everybody falls into when I talk about this. The process is not a technology. The process isn't Salesforce. It isn't a lead status, or it's none of that stuff, right? It's process first.
Got it.
What you're talking about is how do you enable that process with some technology? Absolutely, David. You can do that, but the process is really straightforward. Thinking about the top of the funnel, similar to how we think about opportunities, right? In sales, we all understand that once you sit across the desk from me and I have a discovery or intro call, you're probably going to have an opportunity and a stage in your CRM, or you think about an opportunity or a stage in your process of, I'm at this stage, it's a discovery call. And if these things happen, then my exit criteria go to this stage with this next action that I'm trying to accomplish, right? If I sell technology, it's a intro discovery. If this makes sense, I go to a demo. If the demo works, I go to a, business case analysis / quote or whatever, negotiation close, or whatever your process might be, right? So what most people don't do is have that same rigor or process at the top of the funnel, right? So buckets is just the same concept of stage definition, exit criteria for helping you drive, leads to opportunity, right? Before you get that meeting across the table, I want to bucket my leads so that I'm as efficient as possible driving folks through the funnel from awareness, consideration, right, all the way through. And so, when we look at bucket 1 in that process, that's uncontacted leads. That's if we go back to our research, this is our SOM, right? Those that we want to service right now. If you don't meet that criteria, get the heck out. It's all those companies and the people, the roles that have the job to be done that we can serve. That's it. That's the first bucket. I haven't attempted them yet, but I have them researched and I have them ready to start my outbound rep. Right? Like that's my bucket 1. Bucket 2 is I've actually started to attempt them, and I'm documenting the path, right? So if bucket 1 is they meet the criteria, but I haven't, there's no the extra criteria I haven't started, I move them to bucket 2 once I've actually been able to start outreach, and that channel that I've started outreach is what I like to call validated. You can call it verified, you can call it whatever, confirmed, it works. If I send an email, it delivers, it doesn't bounce. If I go to social media, you're active on social, if I'm going to use it as a touch point. If I call, the number is not bad, and it gets through to either you or your voicemail, right? That's working. And again, everything above remains the same. Now, if I continue to do outreach to those folks and you pick up the phone, we have an actual conversation, or you respond via email, or you connect on LinkedIn and I get a DM started, now I can move you to priority. I have validated that you will have a conversation in this channel and you're a priority lead for me now, bucket 3, because I've started a conversation and I'm gathering information, building awareness, whatever it might be. And now I know a lot more about at least you as a lead in terms of my ability to have a conversation in that channel. The final bucket is I've actually got you to agree to some time to meet with me. And if I go and start my day every day, I'm going to work these buckets backwards. First thing I'm going to do is confirm the meetings I have. And I'm doing this ahead of time, by the way. So if it's a week out, I'm confirming my week. If it's the next 2 days, if they're not confirmed, it could be. Now, once I've confirmed all my meetings, I move to those that I've already activated in a channel, and I have some sort of scheduled task from my previous engagement. I wasn't able to book an appointment. That's why they're in this bucket. And I know that you respond to emails, or you pick up your phone, or you're active in social, and I haven't talked to you, or whatever my SLA is. I'm going to do that. That's my personalization. I'm driving that conversation to the next phase. I'm providing something, education piece. I'm piquing interest, doing whatever I need to do. And that's where I'm spending the majority of my time on personalization and really building a relationship to try to move them forward. Once I've exhausted my activities and my priorities where I know I have those channels activated, then I can move back to working. Working is those leads that I've already validated that a number works. So if I have a bucket to working, I can power through these, even if I don't have a dialer, right? I should be able to do 100, maybe 200 dials a day if all my other work's done. I don't have any of the other work, so I can just power through this. These are good numbers, not dealing with shit data. I'm going through, it's going to voicemail if I'm not having conversations. I'm increasing my chances of a connect rate, and I'm really powering through that. But I haven't had a conversation yet. I haven't had an email response, or I haven't had some sort of connection. Once I've exhausted all that, then I go back to the money pot of the top of the funnel of only those I think I can service, and I spend the time trying to activate them. And I'm doing that manual work of documenting the path. If I dial, it's a dial by name directory, it's an IVR, and I press 5, I get all that in there so that the next time it's a faster dial. And then once I've exhausted maybe the refill of 20 to 30 leads a day into that, then I'm going to go and do my research and finding net new leads that would go back into bucket 1. That's my day, right?
Collapse
I
on the
don't,
ground at that point.
yeah. Well, so I don't spend my time trying to go one lead,
One
pick
by
up the
one.
phone,
Yeah.
send an email, okay, one more lead,
Research.
pick up the phone, do some research. I don't do that, right? I work my buckets. I create my
Very
buckets. I work my
philosophical.
buckets.
Question for you. Actually, 2 came in. Timeline of this. So it sounds like if you go through this whole process, that if you go back, if you're working up from here to uncontacted, then if there's nothing in uncontacted, then that's when you start to load that in with the research. So the timeline on this, like how, I guess what they're trying to say is, how long should something be in working? How long should it be in priority before you start to move it out?
Now, you're going to work every single lead that gets in through this process until you get a yes and no, and not me or not now, right? Because at the very beginning, you've researched, before it even becomes bucket 1, you say, this is a company that I think I can serve. It's a hypothesis. You don't know yet because you haven't talked to them yet, but I think they look like someone I can help. And this is a person at that company who typically has a problem that I can solve, right? They're trying to, the jobs to be done, I can serve, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, I'm going to work that lead until I get a yes and no, and not me, not now. And I'm going to just keep working them through my buckets, right? Sometimes you may have someone in working for a long time, right? But if they meet the criteria of someone you want to serve, that's fine. You can attempt them as often as you want. They're someone you want to try to engage with. If you use the validation process and the number's bad, well, you won't be calling them. If you can't email them, you're not going to be emailing them. And if you're stuck on social and they're active on social, well, that might be your only channel. And so that's going to take some time. You're not sitting there pinging them every day, but you're doing it, on a cadence that makes sense to try to activate them. If you can't get any of those channels, that's when you get them out, right? You don't have any channels to work them. Don't have a lead sitting there that doesn't have a channel you can work. In an ideal state, you're working your buckets, and you try to get to at least 100 records, 100 people that are perfect fit, swim lane, ICP, whatever you want to call them, SOMs, right? Perfect fit in a channel that you've already started a conversation where you have open tasks, 100 open tasks daily. Because if you can get there, your connect rates, because as people who've picked up the phone before, are going to be through the roof. The awareness and the success rates are going to be through the roof, and you're going to start to get to a point where you're going to be easily able to book 1 or 2 appointments every single day by working your priorities. That's your goal. Get to about 100 in the priority bucket. That takes time, though. You got to build those buckets up. If you want to learn more about this and how it really, really works, talk to Sean Cease. Sean Cease hounded me for over a year after reading the book, putting this into practice, and as an individual contributor, he started seeing massive success. It took him about 6 to 9 months before his buckets were really solid and he started seeing the fruits of the labor. But when those buckets are created, your job gets easy. He has the 5 by noon hashtag. It's a real thing. He's a full cycle rep, booking 5 appointments a day for himself. Back in the day when he was doing that, that's what he was doing for his company. Simply following buckets, and he didn't have automations and he didn't have the connect and sell. It was It was simply using the buckets, working the buckets, building them up, and then daily focusing on re-engaging with someone at a date and time that they said to re-engage with. Those follow-ups are where the gold is, and buckets allows you to have a systematic way of managing and not allowing those follow-ups to slip through the cracks.
Got it. Okay. And then the other quick thing was nurturing, or, when something has gone through all the buckets and there was no response or anything like that. What do you do with those root records?
There is, explain to me what you mean by nurturing going through the buckets. You can't go through the buckets until you get a conversation. So you're stuck in working until you get an activation, meaning a response, a pickup.
What about if it's a no? I think, no, not interested, not now. You just
Yeah,
mark that, and then where does it go? Is it in a bucket still?
it's a priority. A no is not a no forever. A
Okay.
not now is not a not now. It's a not now. It's a future follow-up. A not me would be a replacement, and you're going to get a referral, which is going to move you, faster through the buckets. You get the name and go. The not me would kick out, but you're not going to go nurture that person. A not me is a referral, and then a yes moves forward. So you can't move out of the buckets once you're in the buckets. This is people I actually want to engage until you get an answer. And I'll drive this point home too. I've been doing this daily pandemic prospecting challenge, and it's kind of funny because the data that I show most days is the cold stuff that I'm doing. And so it's like a lot of activity, not a lot of conversations. And most of those conversations are no, not interested, etc. But those all go to a follow-up. A lot of the work that I was doing in the middle of the shitstorm, almost all of them were no, not now, not now, not now. So I tag it. We spoke mid-March, in the middle of March, my notes. We spoke mid-March, March Madness, COVID. I was talking, I'm following up now because, whatever reason it was in the first place, you're a sales leader here. Just a quick question, is your team still selling this environment? Yes, we are. Perfect. That's the reason I was reaching out. Can we talk about how we can, blah, 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 right? Get into that conversation. And the success rate on those no's, the hardest conversations that I was having in the middle of the shit storm, I posted the follow-up on one of my days, 8 conversations, 4 meetings, right? On a list of, it was like 100 dials, right? And those are all no's, hard no's. Like, it probably hurt my ego no's in the middle of a bad time to be calling, which led to 4 appointments in one day when I did my follow-ups at the end of April, right? So the no's are actually very, very solid follow-ups. The not nows, of course, are all what most people will follow up on, but the no's, the quick no's, those ones you can't let go of if you truly believe you might be able to serve them. Here's the key here is you don't know until you have that conversation. So don't allow someone to say no, click, don't call me, click, whatever, to stop you from trying them again in the future. There's no such thing as a nurture if you're following best practices and you're pushing people through buckets. Until they say, take me off your list, right? If they say, take me off your list, then take them off your list. Don't be that guy.
You respect that.
Yeah.
This has been great. So I had one last question, Ryan, that came in about the book. It's just called Outbound Sales, No Fluff, right? And they can get it on Amazon or.
Yeah, hit me up after this. I'll send you a free copy. Anyone who wants a copy, send you a free paperback. If you're in the U.S., if you're international, you got to deal with it yourself. Go on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon.
Kindle.
But
here's a couple of those we'll put that link in, and here's a link to a few of those articles that you sent that are great. That jobs to be done is just key, man, for setting up that first part of the bucket system. I just want to thank you for all the advice. I think we have a solid game plan here for folks, so that I think everyone's felt sort of like we're bouncing around lost here in this mess, but getting that process in place, sticking to the process, the list is your strategy, setting up the buckets, a lot of great takeaways from here. Got a couple of chats coming in. Anad, thank you so much for jumping on. Ernest, Mustafa, Chris. I even saw Jeff Haber on there. I tried to see how we could block Jeff Haber off of the Zoom, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. So Jeff, thanks for jumping on. I'm over at 10bound. Ryan's at Connect and Sell. Let's connect on LinkedIn and do this again. Thanks everybody for jumping on. Ryan, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.